Good morning everyone, and thanks for coming along today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about neighbours in general, why and what. So it may be going over a little bit of old ground for some of you, so I apologise to start with, but it's good to get the picture painted. So as I said, I'm Drew. I work for EECA, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority. We license the Neighbours tool, and with NZGBC we deliver and administer the tool within New Zealand. So as Andrew said, we've had a good uptake in the last couple of months, so we're looking to go forward here. So with that, let me work this first. Okay. So what's the landscape of Neighbours' energy efficiency contribution to improve New Zealand's commercial building stock? There's no better illustration than Auckland. We're on the cusp of probably the most significant land use and building use change in several generations. Prime office stock is heading closer to the water. Wynyard in the foreground will look dramatically different in 10 years' time. A mass of otherwise perfectly respectable B and C grade buildings are and will undergo transformation and will be under the building performance microscope. Energy efficiency is a great indicator for buildings. Just to get a bit of an idea of who's here today, I always find it quite good just to break you into three groups just to see who we're dealing with. So by a show of hands, can we just have an indication of who would class themselves as an owner or facilities manager? Okay. What about architectural design consultants, service agents? Okay, large portion, I'd say, of that. And tenants that would be looking into Neighbours. Okay. All right, well, welcome. And hopefully today we'll tell you a little bit more about Neighbours, because the whole thing with Neighbours or any energy efficiency, it's a buy-in from everyone. It's not just one group that can do it. Everyone has to be in to buy in and get it done. So just a slight little bit about EECA. So who is EECA? And motto, we are working to make New Zealand a better place to live, economically, environmentally and socially through the better use of energy. So it's a very broad term, but it covers three main areas: residential, business and transport. So you'll probably be familiar with our residential. We've done 316,000 homes, insulated through Warm Up New Zealand program, targeting vulnerable groups with the remaining funding. Media campaign to promote energy efficiency products, appliances and vehicles through regulation and labelling such as Energy Star. So most of you would have seen Energy Star on your appliances. And then transport division is heavy vehicles, light vehicles, which is driver training, fuel efficient tyres. And at the moment we've got low emission vehicles and EVs contestable fund open. So that's our next stage in transport. Business, which is the team I work in, we deal with government sectors and focus on improving the competitiveness of New Zealand businesses by reducing energy consumption relative to production, reduce energy costs, improve reputation. So basically trying to get businesses more productive, reducing costs, improve output. So that's just not buildings, that's also a lot of industrial sites we work with, and that's quite a measurable task. This is a slide I always like to see, or something similar to this. So driving into the city on a Saturday, Sunday night, you always see lights on in a building. The first thing I think of is, are people working? Or the cleaners there? Is the BMS not working, the lights automatically on, or are people just not turning it off? It's a very simple measure of how buildings are managed and performed. And I believe that if they're doing this at night on a weekend, then how are they operating it during the day? How's the HVAC system working? How's the lighting control working? How are the lifts working? So it's a very simple slide, but yeah, it always comes home to me that it makes a lot of sense. Now, sorry for this one. It's not the clearest slide, but the last couple of months there's been a change of focus with carbon within New Zealand. So I've seen similar slides to this. So your dark blue line or your light blue line is basically gross or total emissions and predictions within New Zealand up until 2040. The red line is New Zealand's target until 2050. That's the carbon thing. We've got ETS at the moment, which you pay for some carbon usage, but there's a huge barrier between the blue and the red line, and that's where we have to improve what we do. And I believe Neighbours, EECA, and that's a lot of our mandates is let's make this better. Changing one set point in a room is not going to do it. You need it a little bit more drastic, and whether 30, 40, 50% savings. So it's a huge target for New Zealand, and everyone's talking these days that it's going to take a radical shift, not just minor shifts. So be good to see how it all goes. Also another talk last week, we had Air New Zealand there, and it rang home to me that they were talking about how they were operating the buildings. They were talking about how they go into electric vehicles. They were talking about what the ground staff are doing with energy. And the end of the conversation, she said, but that is 1% of our carbon emissions. 99% is through the fuel usage. So that hit home to me that, you know, a company like that is focusing on the 1%. They're not focusing solely on the 99%. They are doing a lot with that, fuel-efficient planes. But, you know, it is that 1%. It is I guess everything counts. It's not you have to get the biggest things all the time. All the little ones matter. So some key benefits of energy efficiency. Obviously, there's cost reductions. Health and well-being, there's proven to have better, healthy environments. And sustainability, it's basically 40% thereabouts of greenhouse gases are coming from as-built or in-built environments, which include commercial buildings. Within commercial buildings itself, 16% of New Zealand electricity is soaked up by buildings. I believe it's 21% of energy when you take in gas and diesel and other things. $800 million a year is spent. We always say 20% is easily achievable, so that's 160 million. And once again, go back to carbon. I know it's not all directly related with energy and electricity in New Zealand, but you know these make a difference. In New Zealand, we have 1,250 buildings greater than 1,500 square metres. That's quite a few buildings. Frank might be able to discuss a little bit more, but they're about to go down to 1,000 square metres in Australia from 2,000 square metres at a minimum. And I think they've just gone over 15,000, is that right? 15,000 assessments been done now. So there's quite a lot of buildings above 2,000 in Australia, and they're the same here. So we've got a long way to go. And in New Zealand, our average energy use indicator is 260 kilowatt hours a metre squared a year. That's quite high for a lot of buildings, so we'd like to see that come down under 100, which you hear about around the world as well. So what is Neighbours? Neighbours is an energy performance benchmark tool that can be used on existing office buildings. The tool allows you to compare commercial office buildings regardless of their location within New Zealand, their tenant occupancy hours, or their core service deliverable functions. Neighbours is a tool to improve energy efficiency. Neighbours is a government-backed rating scheme delivered by EECA, working with NZGBC, and the tool has been used within Australia for 14 years and is quite successful. It's a rating system. It's a star system. It's like a lot of other rating tools. Sometimes there's a little bit of confusion with how many stars, whether it's 0 to 10, 0 to 5. This is a 6-star system. Obviously, market average is 3, aspirational 6. And just a quick calculation the other day, New Zealand's currently around 3.5 to 4-star, generally 3.7, 3.6, depending if it's a tenancy, base build or whole building. So we are tracking above average, but I think that's a bit of an indicator of who's doing it as well. So it's a lot of the top end buildings that are doing it compared to the bottom end. So it's quite good. For all those that don't know, there's three ratings. You've got your tenancy, which is generally your office space that most people sit in, which is just your lights, power, and then you have your base build, which most facility managers and operators will do, which is your air conditioning, lifts, central core services. And then you'll have a whole building, which is basically a combination of both. So this is a good little slide about what is tenant and what is base build. So tenant, as they say, it's your lights that run your signage outside. It's your lights that are on your floor. It's your power points that are on your floor. It's your server rooms with your air conditioning unit. So that also comes into it. It's your generator fuel. And sometimes, depending on lease, it's toilet extract fans. So base building covers most other equipment on site, I guess you could say. It covers all your HVAC, your fan coil units, or your DX systems on the floors. It covers your lifts and escalators. It covers your centralised supplementary services, such as your cooling tower, toilet extract fans, car park and lighting in common areas and power common areas, generator fuel, any sort of automatic blinds on the building. So it covers everything else, and that's been a little bit of a stumbling block for people coming on, is making sure they've got the right metering in place for a tenant a base build, and hence sometimes why the whole building gets done. So why do a Neighbours rating? Rating the operational performance of a building allows you to systematically plan and improve the building. I'll keep coming back to this. You keep doing it. It's not just one time. You continuously do it and you'll see the improvements. It creates a feedback loop, allowing you to address issues, examine performance, make improvements and re-rate. Neighbours is not designed to be a one-off. And every year you can track your building's performance through Neighbours. So for the owners or facilities managers out here today, you don't have to publicise your rating. We've always said that. If your building starts with a low rating, you can simply use it as a benchmark to track your progress as you implement energy efficiency measures. It's a starting point. Many of these measures cost nothing or little, and once your rating has improved, you can use it to attract higher value tenants and higher returns. Uptake of Neighbours, that's what we're here for, is likely to be market driven and will be promoted by EECA over the long term because a more efficient built infrastructure will use less energy resources. Neighbours is simply a guide to progress as you implement energy efficiency measures. When you're satisfied with your rating, you might want to promote it and let everyone else know. Tenants are now asking for New Zealand ratings, and hopefully that continues. There's another conference I went to last week as well that a large industrial user was doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and they're reducing their carbon footprint. And it went out to the market. A question got asked: Why are we not reading this in the newspaper? Why aren't we reading this in the magazines? And his response was pretty simple. It was, "We'd love to, but the media doesn't want to hear it." So, in a way, he said after that although he's got sustainability core values within the company's values, which they're aiming to achieve, he saw that if they didn't do it and something happened in 5 years' time and they were doing the same things they are doing today, then that's where they got caught with their pants down. And in theory, they couldn't change their 300 sites around New Zealand overnight to the new technology. So they had to start to implement it now and keep going forward. So I thought that was quite good. So for the property managers, skills are being calculated to make a 1.3 star difference. Independent basis to proving to your client that you're managing their interests well. Improving building, do I just skip a couple of slides there? Adding more value for your clients. If you're a tenant and want to get Neighbours, what can you expect? You can reduce your operating costs. It's a sign of quality for the people who own and look after your building. You can promote your company's sustainability values. It's a good way to track and put into your reports. You can engage your staff with sustainability, and you can always put it as part of your leasing negotiations from the start. So there's two different approaches not two different approaches. Here's two common approaches to energy management. So I think everyone's seen this. Someone has a look at a process, a bill, whatever it is within your factory or business. So basically, costs are too high. You implement some saving opportunities. You save some money. In this instance, you save 10%, and then people forget about it. Costs go back up. Energy use gets put back on. Lights left on at night. HVAC gets turned back down colder. Costs go up again, and it's a cycle. It keeps going up and down. Neighbours is a little bit more aligned to a program approach. So you want buy-in from senior management. You start making savings. You get the first 10% quite easily again. But then if you've got buy-in from everyone and everyone's looking for it, you're going to continue to go down. You'll get to stages where you need upgrading for HVAC. You put a program into place. You'll see a big drop. But it's a long-term. And in this instance, you're looking at 25% savings. Once again, the carbon from the start, we're looking at 40, 50% savings. So it's a huge ask. And even with that carbon, 50% of our carbon emissions is from basically dairying, which is excluded from all our things. So in theory, we've got to make up all that 100% gap with 50% of the market. So that's where all these little parts count, and how Neighbours Ratings can help everyone get to New Zealand's goal as well. So before, it's not a one-off rating. This is aligned to the slide before. Each year, saving cost on cost. So by the time you get to the 8th one or re-rating, you're always going to improve. So the Neighbours' philosophy has always been to compare buildings against their peers and not to penalise a building for factors outside of a building's tenant's control. To ensure this philosophy is upheld, the Neighbours tool are developed for a standard national method. This is a strict set of definitions and rules to ensure Neighbours New Zealand ratings are done equally. I think everyone sees that. If you ever get into Neighbours, it is a very rule-orientated, very detail-orientated process. Once you get it down, it's a lot easier from year to year. But there's a few issues with getting it to start with, so making sure you get your processes makes a huge difference. So the market-based approach takes regional variations into account. Energy uses in buildings based in central Otago would be different than energy use in buildings in the far north. In effect, this allows us to measure Granny Smith's apples with Gala. So you're trying to measure like for like, and that's what Neighbours is about, trying to get everyone on the same par to measure buildings the same. So a Neighbours tool is used for fair comparison between buildings that are different demands on the services. For example, under this tool, the energy use of a building that operates a 24-hour call centre on a whole floor can be fairly compared to energy use of a building that shuts down at 7 p.m. and leave with all their lights blazing. So we're still comparing apples with apples, but good apples this time and rotten apples. So it's getting everyone on that same page, making sure the way that it's rated, it's fair, it's consistent. So when you are doing your sustainability reports, if you are comparing buildings, you've got a baseline, you've got a guide. It's quite good. So I've only been at EECA for a short period, about 6 months, but since being here, I've had a few questions with Neighbours. Two of the most common ones is, how do I improve my rating? And based on the building, what sort of rating should I get? So people are trying to find out where they rate and how to improve it. So a lot of you guys are working in the industry here from what I see. So here's a little bit of research that was done to give you a rough idea of different rating levels and what you can expect in different buildings. So if you want a 3.5-star building, quite often they're fully glazed orientations, might be single glazed, tinted, no external shading. So a 4.5-star, glazing with spandrel panels, single glaze, tinted, fixed external shading. If you want a 5.5-star, orientation sensitive windows to wall ratio, double glaze, double skin, tinted, fixed active external shading. So you can see quite a big difference between the outside of the building. So quite often a lot of these older buildings aren't going to get to that level with all changes, but newer buildings can. So in regards to HVAC, 3.5 constant volume or VAV systems, 4.5 VAV or low temperature VAV systems, 5.5 low temperature VAV or passive chilled beam. So once again, huge difference in technology within those buildings to get the ratings. Maintenance, 3.5, not recommissioned or tuned, so basically I just let it to run as it is. A few temperature complaints, they'll go and fix it. 4.5-star, well tuned and recommissioned. 5.5-star, fully commissioned and well tuned. And as well as lighting, basically 20 watts a square metre, 3.5-star, 4.5-star, 15 watts, 5.5-star, 5 to 10 watts. So you can see a big difference between just the buildings themselves. So you are going to be classified in one or two different areas based on the building, but you can improve your performance. So this is a study that was done by Warren Centre for Advanced Engineering at Sydney Uni. You can't add all these up and go, how do I get from a 3-star to a 5.5-star? It doesn't work that way, but it just shows you the emphasis you can put in different areas to increase your star rating. So I believe most people probably think by building technology, it's all in what's in the building that will improve it. It's not actual the fact. Management plays a big part, economy and disclosure. So I'll talk about them a little bit more to give you a bit of an understanding. So building technology, that is your equipment, that's your chillers, that is your boilers, your HVA, your BMS system. So obviously to increase your star, you can replace your equipment. Obviously high capital cost, not a lot of people are going to do that unless it's time for refurbishment. And that's part of the long-term strategy. Getting everyone here is your neighbour's rating may not be so good now, but you might be looking in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. So when your next chiller is going to be replaced, when your next boiler is going to be replaced, when you've got a tenant fit out or a few floors being occupied, then it's the best time to look at it BMS systems always want to be replaced every 10 years or so. So, every time they go to do that, have a think about it. An interesting one to me is management. This is 1.5 star improvement. So this is what a lot of you guys here today can influence. So significant the way a building is managed can make almost the same difference as rating for technology, so only 0.1 of a star different. Changes in the way people operate the building are relatively cheap and effective. So do the building users know what to do? So are your tenants understanding what type of building you've got, what your limitations are? Does a facility manager know how to maximise the system? Does your facilities manager know the building? Does he know how to operate it? Is there a program of continual review and metering of energy use? Do you have some sort of monitoring system? Do you have any meters on site that you can do that? An important one to me is service providers understand the building, tenants and operators requirements. No good in having all this at high level if you're not telling the guy on the ground who's on there with the tools fixing it on a Friday afternoon that energy is the key to the operation and changing set points and turning things on manual and things like that. So do the people fixing it actually understand the building? From my experience, people might have been trained 30 years ago and they're still working on the tools. They might not be working the same way as when they were trained 30 years ago. So there might be a bit of upskilling. So economy cycle, for those that don't understand, that's basically an air conditioning system that brings in outside air instead of recirculating air and cooling it and heating it. So is it necessary to operate a mechanical air conditioning system all day? Generally, in Auckland, you get around a lot of the times you don't need to. Wellington, even more. So the answer is no. Does your air and then you'd have an economy cycle? If it doesn't, are you able to do it? If not, if you're doing a new building, can you incorporate it? Even though we say you don't have to publish your rating, it shows that if you do, you actually end up with a better star rating. If you let people know what your star rating is, then you're going to make sure you get a better one next time. So if you keep it internal in your team, it's all good, but they're showing that you'll improve it a little bit more just by disclosing it. So it's a great way to measure displays results, sets up small targets for everyone, and can be a NABERSNZ certified rating, give the people a wake-up call they needed. So it's, if your staff and tenants know what it is, it makes it a little bit easier. A bit about Neighbours in today. It is a cyclical thing. You measure performance, you identify issues, you improve, you report. But you've got to keep going around. If you stop after one cycle, it's not going to give you what you need in the long term. So we need to operate these buildings more efficiently, make sure they work better, and you'll get a good Neighbours rating out of it. So hopefully this isn't anything too new for a lot of you and you understand it. It's getting the next stage, getting everyone else to buy into it. So so we can create influence and how to operate a building. So notice Mark here, Mark Sinclair. You did a panel discussion last week at Facilities Integrate. And one thing that I got out of this discussion, it was a mixture of 6 different people within the industry, was if you don't work together, you're not going to get the best outcome. So they were talking about developers, they were talking about consultants, service companies, NZGBC. So there's 6 different people all saying that they're not included enough within the process of a building operation. So whether you're a facilities manager, whether you're a service company, everyone's got a part to play in this, even tenants. And that's the main thing I got out of that, which I think is where everyone falls down. It's getting everyone on the same page, on the same ball, working together. So the next thing as well I've just put here, so the next time you guys do a tender, whether it's you're writing a tender for tenants or you are a tenant, just ask about the contract, ask about neighbours. For your service companies, do you have neighbours in there? Is your service all about can you get there the quickest and can you fix it the cheapest, or should it be about making sure that building is operating efficiently? So there are some companies out there doing a great job. There's some other improvements out there as well. So that's the end for me. So thanks for everyone for listening. Next up, we've got Satish Varna from Argosy. He's just going to give us a bit of an example of some of his neighbours' buildings, and then we'll follow by Frank. So thank you.